Dear colleagues, yeah, it's working good, perfect. Good morning. We continue our discussion about the National Bank. During this panel, we will hear opinion from businesses, the opinion about work of the National Bank changed, or maybe emotions changed while the opinion remained the same. But I would like to start from recollecting our previous meeting with the National Bank representatives in December 2015, when I, for the first time, saw that directors of the companies who usually were very resentful people, they cried, what you were doing, you were killing the trade, etc. So today, I would like to hear from you, from business representatives, from experts, why, to which extent, 2 years after the after implementation of the new strategic course of the National Bank, whether it was good for business, whether that painful limitations were useful, and what should be our opinion now? First of all, dear colleagues, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to discuss operations of the National Bank. We have been hearing rather negative opinion about this, and last week the European Business Association made a public statement that we stand for support of this team, and that we support the policy of the National Bank. At the very beginning, policy of the National Bank was very tough for business, and I should recognize that despite all the emotional reaction, emotional response to the policy steps made by her team, by Ms. Gontareva team, after her explanations, the business took it more with bigger patience and tolerance. So each meeting with Ms. Gontareva in the European Business Association, which we used to hold regularly each quarter, makes it clear what the policy was, how what was the necessity in this policy. And I would like to mention that gradually Ms. Gontareva and her team are removing currency limitations and took course on removal, full removal, complete removal of those limitations, which will happen at some point in future. At the same time, the business recognizes that NBU had implemented a set of reforms. First of all, they changed the team fully. They are very cooperative, and in each case of any problem, we are able to approach to them, and they are able to find solutions. On the other hand, they cut down the number of employees and cut down the number of functions in the national bank. Also, they managed to carry out very unpopular work. They carried out sanation of bank system, and businessmen in our European Business Association agree with this course and support this course, political course of the National Bank. In general, we could say that during last 2 years, the National Bank and its leadership had done more positive and right things which the National Bank had done during the previous more than 20 years. So we stand for the independence of this institution. We call people not to try to oppress these people who work for the state of economy. I would like to ask Kateryna Glazkova whether the Association of Ukrainian Entrepreneurs agrees that reforms carried out by the National Bank were correct, whether it was useful despite the criticism which we heard. Thank you, Taras, for the invitation and the possibility for Ukrainian entrepreneurs to express their opinion. Our position is as follows. We support the policy of the National Bank. We understand the steps and the limitations which were taken at the initial stage of the bank reforming work, but we believe that in current situation those measures are not sufficient for further development of businesses. I think this is the right time to allow business to understand that they could develop further. Our members of our association build up their relationship with the National Bank, and it's really very cooperative, and our members are happy with the cancellation of some limitations, but those cancellations are not sufficient. So in early summer we had discussion about major hinders for the export development, and the currency regulations were mentioned as big limitation. If you have dollars and you need euros, you have to sell dollars and to buy euros. This creates additional obstacles. Moreover, it's rather difficult to explain this policy of the National Bank to foreign partners, and it takes time, and it takes money. Also, the National Bank had decreased the interest rate by 0.0%, but this removal is not meaningful for the banks in general, and moreover, the banks are unable to give loans to businesses, and Ukrainian businesses quite often say that this is a big shortcoming. And quite often the banks choose to earn money on the T-bills instead of giving loans to businesses. The business is waiting for the next steps from the National Bank in order to move forward and develop the economy, not just to support the economic instability. Without this, we won't be able to grow.
I believe that the activity of the National Bank cannot be separate. They work jointly with other institutions and agencies, and reformation type activity should be joint, should be supported by everyone, because we will not be able to just have one national bank. I want to say that I agree with that. The Minister of Finance, the Prime Minister, the Mayor are to get involved. The Parliament, that's the biggest problem. I believe that all together we'll be able to get united. The Parliament is the most complicated because it reflects the Ukrainian society. That is why it is more difficult to find support there, but it is possible, and there are many examples of successful voting in Parliament. To you as the representative of the National Bank of Ukraine, Sergiy, you've heard what is the position of business. It's clear that macrofinancial stability is important for business. It was the subject of discussion with business for the few last years. Everyone understands that financial stability is important, but besides macrofinancial stability, there should be quite liberal currency regulation, and money should be affordable. How does the National Bank of Ukraine try to find the balance? Because these are the components of the same process. Yes, you said it correctly, that microfinancial stability is the priority for the National Bank, but at the same time the National Bank has to support economic growth. We understand that the limitations that were established, they allowed to stabilize the situation. At the same time, they are like tax on business. At the same time, we can talk about other market mechanisms, and we understand that during the crisis events, during the situations that we had, they had to increase the rate, but when we have the signs of stabilization, we see that the stabilization is manageable. The National Bank starts reducing their limitations. But we could be more active. Of course, we need to look at the surrounding that we saw in Ukrainian economy in 2015, 2016. We see how prices were going down for raw materials. We see the escalation of military conflict in Donbass. We see the trade limitations from Russia. The situation for Ukraine was not very favorable to so that all the limitations could be removed. And one more thing, the National Bank in fact communicates to different types of businesses, and we have many requests for removing some of the limitations. For exporters, that is the percentage of the mandatory sale of foreign currency. For banks, it's restrictions for currency position and other. And we are trying to remove limitations as soon as we can do it, because there should be the balance between what will give the biggest positive today so that the system is not disbalanced. We hope that in the future the conditions will be more favorable. We need to take into account also the internal factor. The national bank policy depends on the reforms in other spheres. And I have two more questions. Very often banks have excessive liquidity. They have a lot of money, but they do not issue loans. There's almost official point of view of banking environment that is related with the improper protection of creditors. Not creditors, but borrowers. Creditors, okay. It's Monday, sorry. And to what extent the banks will be allowed to protect their rights? This is one of the biggest, of the most important elements in protection of rights of creditors, the reform of judicial system, which would allow to introduce these laws efficiently. But when we are talking about today's situation, banks have liquidity, and they know that many banks today are looking for potential borrowers, but they don't always find them. The borrowers who say that they will not be able to find the bank who could issue loan, the reason is the transparency of these companies and their financial indicators. Maria, the question to you, as to the expert. To what extent there was this balance in the policy? Because there are different opinions that very rigid monetary policy is harmful for the economy. Probably more money should be given to real sector despite the inflation. To what extent the process of reforms was balanced? To what extent it could be better or worse? I brought several slides, and that's illustrating the reaction of business to this crisis and to these restrictions. I talked to many businessmen. We see that people agreed to that, but they are not voting with money. The blue is investments, domestic and foreign. That's greenfield investments. We have nothing, and we will not have anything till people understand that all these risks are predictable. If the person has a currency risk, but the person can predict the risk, then the person can invest into the project that would be profitable. And the next graph is direct investments, and the blue is direct investments of foreign banks, and that was like converting credits into capital. And the green, we don't see them. Business votes with money. Whether it will stop doing it depends on several factors. That's a survey made by JFK and Dragon Capital out of more than 100 investors. I don't see it, but the first factor is corruption. The second that hampers investment is lack of trust in judiciary. Then the third one is military conflict with Russia. And the fifth one is restrictive capital and foreign exchange controls. If we compare, what does the global science tell us? I'm looking at the reports of other experts. The world perceives it negatively, and the level of investments goes down because of the credit risk of the country and the control and the severity of capital controls. This is not the problem of this leadership of the National Bank. That is the problem that we had even in times of from the times we got independence. There was the crisis of '98, and since then the leadership of the country, it's not just about National Bank of Ukraine, but it's about different policies. There's a big external scary crow, and we are hiding from this scary crow behind the blanket. That's what was done in '98 and 2009. Instead of learning how to live in this evil, in this alien world where there are some investments, funds, banks, global flows, trade flows, Ukraine hides. It accumulates the disbalance on trade account, disbalance on the capital account, and in the end, when there is a crisis, the hryvnia falls down, and the country makes same mistake again and again. How it works for I put it on a slide, but I cannot find it. What has changed? This leadership of the National Bank made hryvnia floating. That's an outstanding step for Ukraine. That was very positive. In the future, it could ensure that we will have no disbalance on a trade account. And we will not be accumulating the debts, and we will not be paying interest on the debt. So the floating exchange rate is a big step, especially because it's not popular in this society. And that step was very important. Another important step, for long the National Bank was not understanding that the quality of portfolio is not what is declared, that all the regulations of the bank, they are not implemented. It's easy to manipulate the auditing report. It's easy to make the window dressing. And the fact and what the National Bank had for many years resulted in the fact that the National Bank now has to do something with all these converting centers and so on. The banks are taking deposits at 20-25%. People know that the state will return it from the fund of guaranteeing deposits, and that creates the moral hazard. People don't want to assess bank, they just bring money there, and the banks are just using this situation. But in fact, Ukrainian banks do not know how to work differently. And the fact that no one gives credits, it's because of high liquidity. The National Bank did it so that it's more difficult to do it, and people don't know how to give money to business. Their risk management is such that they either cannot issue loan to anyone, or they can issue loan to their own companies, but they cannot do it, and we have the problem.
It is important to decide now in what direction to move further. We should move more rapidly with the limitations. We should recognize there is a big financial system around us in the world, and we cannot agree with the statement that our economy is functioning in dollars. Look how many cash in dollars remains with our MPs. We should learn how to work in the open market. The economy is already open, and we cannot close it. The transfer pricing, customs services, currency control services does not allow to to pretend that we are isolated. You can withdraw money easily, but you cannot bring money, money in currency easily. All the countries around us evaluate the barriers for investors for coming into the market. And they clearly see that, for example, in Poland, it's quite easy to start business, start doing business, while in Ukraine they have to overcome many barriers. This is a big problem for external investors and for internal investors. We have to do something with these limitations. In cash market, the limitations had created black market of currency. We made a survey, and up to 50-60 million of the turnover of in this market, while computer modeling suggests that it may amount to $1 billion. These are problems which we should keep in mind. We should not ignore them, and we should resolve them. We have to cooperate with the world, with global system, and not try to pretend that this world does not exist. Now, I would like to add a very short remark. I agree with the majority of statements made by Maria, but I would like to suggest that we cannot put all the charges on the National Bank. Of course, the system of limitations is cumbersome, and everybody wishes to remove it. But the survey about obstacles for investments are not the limitations in currency area, but the corruption and other and four other factors which are more important for investors. The majority of investors know that Ukraine is a corrupt country. This suggests that, of course, the National Bank is not an ideal institution. It has much work to do, but it is not alone to change things in this country. Dear colleagues, to sum up our discussion, which used to be very detailed, I would like to sum up. I think that this was almost first discussion about the seriousness of the reforming process started by National Bank. On the one hand, it creates some negative, maybe, consequences. On the other hand, we clearly see that just actions of the National Bank are not enough to steer up business activity in this country. And now my question to all of you. Having observed the positive trend in banking system in terms of the amount of lending, in terms of the business activity, what we can do to bring it to the proper level, what interest rate should be offered by the National Bank. Sergiy, as NBU representative, could you contribute to discussion about the currency regulations and about the interest rates? I will start with the interest rate, which is my field. Let us imagine what interest rate would be the best for Ukrainian economy. Our options is based on the best neutral real interest rate. It is at the level of 1-2%. If we keep in mind that inflation is expected to be at the level of 5-6%, and adding to it 1-2%, we should say that the average interest rate of at the level of 7-8% would be the best. Of course, in case of negative shocks, in case of threats to the price stability, the average interest rate would be at higher level. If we face the outflow of capital or sharp increase in fuel prices, of course it will go up quickly. If we face more positive trends, slower inflation, etc., then the average interest rate would drop, of course. And now about administrative limitations in currency area. We do not have a specific roadmap here, although we have an approximate schedule coordinated with some economic indices, economic processes like currency reserves, external situation around the country, reforming inside the country, the pace of reforming inside the country. If all those aspects will grow positively, then this would speed up the process. And as to Maria's presentation, the academic approach to limitations on the outflow of capital, I disagree with you that outflow of capital should be controlled. That's not true that the countries do not control it. Experience of the countries had radically changed after 2009, and almost all the countries have a prudential instruments controlling the capital outflow. I fully agree that this was adequate explanation. Of course, we wish to have liberalization as more quickly as possible. I would add, we have a big document which makes pressure on currency, on exchange rate liberalization. This is the association agreement. The EU suggests that systemic currency regulations should be removed gradually, but we should preserve the instrument of short-term regulations in the area of currency exchange. This is my contribution to your more academic discussion. I would also like to add that we have the IMF program, which also contains the list of limitations and conditions when they would be removed. And now at this stage, I would like to sum up with the following statement, that the fact that all 5 panelists spoke in one direction And this only proves that we have a good dialogue between NBU and the market actors, and we have coordinated position between all the agencies and experts, which is a reflection of the coherent position of this community. All the stakeholders understand the essence of what's going on. Sometimes we criticize the pace, but actually this is the normal scenario, and everybody is ready to remain in the process, to contribute to it, and only discuss some practical details of its implementation. This shows that on the framework of this discussion, we move forward. Dear colleagues, whether we have any questions from the audience, or you agree with us or disagree with us, Andrei, would you like to ask a question? I like your position, but nevertheless, I would like to hear from you what was the price paid by businesses for the NBU policy. I would answer probably, we all paid the high price for this reform, but actually everybody counts the money. People, bureaucrats in the electronic declarations, and businesses. The issue is not the amount of this price, but whether it is acceptable under these conditions, and what are the stakes actually. This is appropriate price to be paid for that huge amount of problems which had been accumulated. Look at the ratings, the value of assets of businesses. Everybody dropped down, but the manipulation is in the formulation of your question. How much business did paid for NBU? Let us reformulate it. How much business paid for Russian aggression, for the rise in energy prices? How much business paid for the raw nature of our economy? How much did business pay for regulating of everything inside the economy? And after all those questions, ask the final question. What NBU was able to offer under all those conditions in order to diminish shocks from all those accumulated shortcomings? But the business paid its price not for NBU activities in general. I agree that we should look at the issue more broader. I would not like to speculate about the word price, but business in Ukraine is very much adaptable. And we wish to work better, in better conditions. Everybody understands why NBU acted that way that it acted, and the only request is to move more rapidly in order to develop and grow more rapidly. Of course, we do not exist in a stable environment. We have high dynamics of the environment, and we have to be strong enough and prepared to this. Dear colleagues, thank you for expressing your opinion. We will have one more panel devoted to NBU activities, and see you